In the late 90s, cannabis was still sold in tiny 1-inch square baggies. When our guy didn't respond to his pager, the only place my friends knew to buy cannabis was in front of City Hall. We would sit across the street in a car, and whoever lost the rock, paper, scissors would take a crumpled handful of 5 notes and ask the grisly-looking people loitering on the front steps for a dime bag. Pinching open the bag, it was commonly wet and underweight. This worked until my friends asked an undercover cop. My brother told me about a guy who held marijuana meetings every Wednesday at the University of Victoria and later in downtown Victoria. The first time I went to see Ted Smith speak, it was nighttime behind the British Columbia Parliament buildings. A circle had formed around the large fountain, and Ted was wearing a full dinosaur costume and wielding a megaphone. He spoke about the environmental damage caused by big oil and the embarrassing pollution that harms our incredibly beautiful marine ecosystems. We scored an 8th from someone in the crowd. It was better quality than the weed we had brought at City Hall. Shortly after I graduated from high school, I decided to attend the weekly hempology meetings at the university. My memory of these meetings at UVic are wrapped in sunshine, blue sky, green fields, and laughing faces playing frisbee, kicking hacky sacks and soccer balls. Every Wednesday at 4:20, students would pour out of class to gather in the center of campus, claiming the fountain area in front of the library. It became the largest student club, surpassing the rowing team. The group preferred to be situated where everyone could see them, visibility being part of the plan to bring this issue to the forefront among young intellectuals. As the meeting size grew, it moved out into the adjacent field, forming a circle of around 420 students at its largest. This weekly session was my introduction to cannabis advocacy. I circled up alongside a great diversity of young people, all surrounding one man with a microphone, Ted Smith. Ted was captivating. He whirled about the center of the group, ponytail bobbing, the microphone cord whipping about his feet like an angry snake. He would tell us the latest in cannabis news from around the world, whether it was the new study published, or a grow-up busted, a person wrongly imprisoned for cannabis, or new legislation tabled. Each week, Ted was the one-stop shop for all your cannabis interests, a font of rebellion. He preached an end to the drug war, charismatically stuffing our ears, blowing our minds in a time when we had falsely outlawed a plant with ancient sacred ties to humanity's liberation. And of course, there were joints. After the updates and news, a few volunteers with squirrely beards and funky hats would shuffle around the circle, casually handing out dozens of pre-rolled roach joints. All week, Ted and his friends would diligently smoke joints so that the roach recycling program was always well stocked with enough sticky, oily roaches to get hundreds of students high. Each week, a volunteer would break open the roaches and roll a hearty quiver of dank roach joints. The largest session I attended was in the underground parking lot across from the Victoria Courthouse, where 3/4 of a pound of roaches had been assembled into a squadron of fatty bombers. As tough as I used to puff, I wandered away from that circle long before it was over, and returned some time later to see a group of die-hard smokers re-rolling the roach joints into 2nd, 3rd, and 4th generation roaches. As the smoke billowed, Ted became impassioned, raging against the injustices of the drug war. In front of Ted was a blanket laid out with glass pipes, membership cards, can of bonds, and books. Local glass blowers would come from all around and lay down a blanket beside him with wares for sale. Membership at Hempology was free, and legalization through education its mandate. Ted sold cannabons for a meager $20 and promised a 1/4 ounce of cannabis once it became legal. The proceeds went toward continued activism of Hempology 101. That is an excerpt from my book, Legalizing Cannabis Extracts, a chapter about Ted Smith, and it goes on to talk a little bit more about my experience getting to know Ted back in the early 2000s. Welcome to the Green Guild Podcast. My name is Owen Smith, and I'm going to lead you through a little bit of cannabis science, and then we're going to interview Ted Smith and get to know him a little bit better. So, to start us off, we're going to explore a study. The study that I'm talking about was recently performed on or recently delivered or finished, and it's a 44-year study, so it's been going on for a long time, and looks at how cannabis affects cognitive decline as we age. It surveyed over 5,000 participants. It was one of the largest and longest studies on the topic. So let's dig into the study and find out more about what this means. The study we're talking about is called Cannabis Use and Age-Related Changes in Cognitive Function from Early Adulthood to Late Midlife in 5,162 Danish men. It's an incredibly long-term study that gives us a rare look into how cannabis might affect our brains as we grow older. The researchers had a clear objective: to see if cannabis use accelerates or reduces cognitive decline from early adulthood, around the age of 20, all the way to late midlife, around the age 64. The goal was to better understand the long-term effects on cognitive health. This study focused on men from Denmark, tracking over 44 years, testing the participants' IQ levels twice, once in their early 20s and again in their 60s. The group was split into cannabis users and non-users to compare results. On average, the key findings were that both groups experienced cognitive decline, but cannabis users had 1.3 fewer IQ points lost compared to non-users. Non-users lost 6.8 IQ points, while cannabis users only 5.3. That's a measurable difference. It is the cannabis, what we might expect is not what we might expect from what we've told in history is not coming through in this study. The idea has been commonly shared that cannabis leads to cognitive decline, and this is repudiating that. So they looked at age. So when did you start smoking cannabis? And they found that age made no significant impact. Also, frequency didn't impact the results either. So it didn't matter when you started or how frequent you used, you were not losing as much IQ points. The study's findings are consistent with other research showing minimal long-term effects of cannabis on cognition. However, it's important to note that cannabis users in the study tended to have a higher baseline IQ and better education, which could have influenced the results. So why does it matter? First, it reassures us that cannabis use doesn't appear to accelerate cognitive decline over decades. For policymakers and healthcare professionals, this data is crucial for creating evidence-based guidelines around cannabis use, especially as its legal and recreational use grows. It's worth noting a few limitations in that the study was performed only on men, and so we would want to know what the results were like on women. The data relied partly on self-reported cannabis use, which could involve some bias. And the study only tracked IQ, so other cognitive functions like memory or attention weren't measured. So in summary, the study provides a valuable long-term insight into cannabis and cognitive aging. It shows that moderate cannabis use doesn't seem to harm cognitive health over time, but as with all things, balance and individual factors matter. What do you think about that? I'm going to introduce Ted Smith, and maybe we can talk about that. Folks, if you know Ted Smith, and I mean really know Ted Smith, you'll understand that he doesn't just stroll through the annals of cannabis history, he practically moonwalks across them, wearing a cloak stitched together from hemp leaves and defiance. Most days you'll find him scaling the towering archives of activism, sifting through decades of policy, protest, and pungent puns to deliver wisdom straight from the resin-soaked roots of the movement. But every once in a while, when the smoke clears and the universe aligns, Ted finds himself in stranger places, knee-deep in a bureaucratic swamp, wrestling crocodilian lawmakers who snap at progress, or perhaps wandering a labyrinth of outdated legislation, armed only with a torch of truth and a pocket full of precedent. From these escapades, he emerges not with a mere scrap of news, but with a treasure chest of tales, sticky, stinky, and absolutely transformative. So here we are, friends, basking in the glow of Ted's tireless quest for justice and his unparalleled ability to weave facts, wit, and wonder into one glorious joint of enlightenment. This, my friends, is the Green Guild, and we are with Ted Smith. Ted, welcome to the Green Guild.
Thanks for having me, Owen. That was a fun introduction. I'll try to live up to that.
And I began the show talking about hempology at UVic and the sort of roots and the start and how I met you. How do you remember those days?
I have some of the fondest memories of the 420s and escapades that we got up to with the students at UVic and a couple of other schools along the way. But certainly the weekly 420s for a time there at UVic were a really magical moment we had every week.
Right. And it wasn't like they would just let you be there. There was conflict in trying to bring education to the university, including one time when you were arrested.
Yeah, they sent undercovers to a 420 to pretend to be students and took a toke off a joint and put the roach in their pocket to use as evidence of my trafficking. But they wouldn't arrest me in front of the students and arrested me later. And so the next week, actually, there was 3 times as many students as we'd ever seen before in protest of my having been arrested. And just made the whole scene even more popular, much to their dismay. So by the time I got back, there was 100 students a week as opposed to 20 or 25. So I guess that was the biggest attempt to shut us down. But it was a fun stretch.
It's an aspect of the activism work that comes up a lot, like when I was writing your story in the book, just how much getting yourself out there and getting in trouble benefits your exposure to the community and brings more people in and helps to expand things.
It's something that in a way, when I started hempology, it was more about education, and I wasn't really looking to get in trouble so much as inform people and actually do a lot more with hemp than I've done, was my original intent, till I started to meet patients, and the urgency of the patients that have cancer and other serious ailments has made me put my personal safety aside at times to do things like get arrested sharing joints or giving out pot cookies or so that urgent need that I hope one day I don't have, that if I do end up in serious pain or in serious trouble, that I'll have the high dosage edibles and without paying exorbitant taxes and things like that I'll need. And so the urgency of others' medical need has made me really decide a long time ago, it's like, I'm going to get arrested as many times as it takes to change the law. But I've tried to be careful to make sure I get arrested under the right circumstances, doing the right things, so that even when I've lost in the court of law because technically the law is quite powerful and doesn't withstand every challenge, I've still won in the court of public opinion. And so, it's been something that, every time I've been arrested, it has, originally it didn't get me a lot of press, but over time, the arrest would get me, in the media, and that would bring attention to the real work of providing medicine to the Buyers Club. And having never quit for a single day along the way after getting raided, it really, has, just brought, more attention and more support for that work. And it's getting in trouble has kind of served me well at times.
Mm-hmm. And like, to go back to stay in the near past, the cookie giveaway. The cookie giveaways are great stories. The one that involves Crime Stoppers and the whole Victoria, or even the police force on horseback. This is the sort of scenes that when you try to think about how we got to legalization, it kind of started with these sort of situations, which you think about it now, they're so exciting and entertaining. Now I want to hear the story. Please share about the cookie giveaways.
Okay.
Because cookies are a big part of why I'm involved as well. As many people know, I'm a cookie crusader. And this is something we'll get into a little later, but cookies at the center, that's all.
Oh, fair enough. Really, it was a woman that made cookies and sold them to AIDS patients that really helped me start the Buyers Club in the first place. That was a huge inspiration, was not only learning about cookies, but seeing how, people really suffering from AIDS benefited so quickly and so much from eating it. And, just brought them almost back to life again in some cases. So, that certainly extended their lives. So, but in the 90s in particular, like, there really wasn't a lot of information about cookies out there. The press wasn't reporting it, and even in the movement and industry, it wasn't something that edible cannabis for patients wasn't even a thing. There was some court cases happening, but it was almost all focused on smoking it. That was historically the fight for medical marijuana. And so, although there was Brownie Mary in the United States, who's kind of our inspiration in some ways, and certainly my baker's inspiration as well. But then, so then, it's like at times I did push my luck in certain ways. And while I didn't sell to the general public a lot, I occasionally would show up at a hempology meeting on Wednesday nights, because I would hold these meetings Wednesday evenings downtown Victoria at 7 o'clock Wednesday nights in different locations, as well as have the 420s up at UVic Wednesday afternoon. So it's kind of go up to UVic and then come downtown right after. And so this one time, I'm not sure which story to tell. There's a couple, but this is a fun one. So it was 2000, and we had just started to get like 100 people every week. So we decided it was big enough to move to the Parliament buildings, where you met us on the back lawn of the Parliaments. And we were so, immature and young. We didn't even have signs or anything saying what we were protesting or it's Hempology 101. It was just 100 people hanging out in a circle with me and a megaphone or microphone. And so we went there for 4 or 5 weeks, and I figured it was time to bring a bunch of cookies to sell to everybody, because it's kind of fun, and I was only selling them for $1, but still I was making $20 or so if I sold a few. So that every little bit helps when you're poor. So I came this one week with a big backpack full of cookies, and when I was approaching the Parliaments, I thought something was up, because I could see the cops on horses were out, and normally they're done their shifts at 5. And so sure enough, when we got to the back, they were there for us, as well as probably a good dozen police officers, and they were a little upset that we were smoking pot at the Parliaments every week, and really not protesting. We were doing it kind of at the back lawn, just kind of having our own little pot party, just kind of ignoring the authorities rather than challenging them, which seemed a bit odd to them. But they were done. They didn't want us there anymore, and we were going to get arrested if we didn't leave. So I'm like, okay, we're going to leave. And the one cop, Lars, we knew him by, who arrested me on several occasions, or tried to anyway, on others. But anyway, yeah, so he's like, is that brownies in your bag? And I'm like, oh no, that's not brownies. Double chocolate cookies might seem like brownies, but they weren't. Anyway, I asked if we could have a few minutes to figure out where we were going to go, because we were just getting there and people were still arriving. And so the police said, yeah, you can have a couple minutes to figure out where you're going to go. They were happy we were agreeing to go and no one was getting arrested and the media weren't getting called and all that sort of thing. The gang was pretty happy when I showed up, because as soon as I got there, they just lit up a whole bunch of joints, and we had about 15, 20 minutes of smoking pot right by the police. And again, this was in the 90s, or 2000 maybe, September 2000, when things weren't so easy or when it wasn't so easy to smoke in front of a cop. And so, I told everybody what the plan was, and it worked perfectly. We went over and told the police we were going to City Hall, which we did eventually. But along the way, we stopped at the front of the Empress. And the police and security up at the ledge had figured they'd done their job, and I guess they don't hang out a lot, so most of the police hung out. They sent a couple bike cops to follow us along the way, which was kind of nice, because there's only 2 of them, and there's like 100 of us or so. And so when we got to the front of the Empress, we suddenly veered to the front steps of the Empress, and when we got far enough away from the road, I dropped my backpack, got everyone to come as close to me as possible, so that when I sold them the pot cookie, the police couldn't get their hands on the cookie, and their instructions were to eat it before they got to the outside of the circle. And so I stood there and sold about 100 pot cookies as fast as I possibly could, while the police on horses and cars and stuff came like running from the legislature to try and get to us. But by the time they got there to back up the 2 cops on bikes, all the cookies were gone. I showed them the empty backpack, and we went back to City Hall after that. But it was super fun.
Yeah, guerrilla tactics combined with street activism, just on the fly, live, getting it done. It seems like that is even also a metaphor of sort of like the continued work, like getting it done against all odds. Figure it out as you go, and because the Victoria Cannabis Buyers Club is where we're at right now, and is the legacy for kind of medical cannabis in Canada that you have built. And as part of that, the cookies that I started to make for you back in 2007 led to my arrest, and then the court case, which was a significant court case. This is the most significant in Canadian cannabis history. And Ted, he was the quarterback for this. Him and Kirk Tusaw were the masterminds behind the challenge that was raised. So maybe you can just talk just a little bit about the significance of that, of that. And as I know, you also had, previous to this, based on the cookie trials that you had, gone over these arguments and been to the Court of Appeal and kind of got stalled.
Yeah, well, certainly, trying to erode the authorities' zeal to enforce the law has been at the crux of my work here. And so far, so good. But, so like you got arrested in 2009, but I'd been through a couple trials before that dealing with the Buyers Club. And one of them, I had been originally charged and convicted of trafficking cannabis resin, and my appeal was successful, almost too successful, because the Crown allowed the charges to be dropped before we could even get in front of a judge and get a written appeal that would overturn the decision rather than just have the matter dropped, which is what the Crown decided to do. And so, having learned a lot about the cannabis laws and how to challenge them, when you were arrested, it was really the biggest opportunity in my life to set precedent. I was so confident that I originally hired a family law lawyer in Victoria to deal with the case, because I thought I really just needed someone to deal with the technicalities more than the constitutional law. One of my favorite memories was telling Kirk early on that he was only going to get one expert witness, and that it was Dr. David Pate, and that was the only witness he needed. Kirk had been practicing law for a few years and somehow didn't remember Dr. Pate from the watermelon court cases that had, again, really helped me learn what we were up against and how to defeat the law. And so, I knew we would only need that one expert witness, which is another part of our case, which is sort of unprecedented to set national law, to win a unanimous decision before the court of law using expert opinion with just one witness is not common, but certainly he was the man we needed. And it was, I would agree, the most significant, maybe aside from the Parker case, which really opened the door for the medical arguments. So, but in a way, ours was the final kind of blow to prohibition that led to legalization, for what it's worth.
The cookies were sort of like the symbol of how simplicity of the medical cannabis, the friendliness of it. But really there's a whole wide array of products, topical products, salves, capsules, all sorts of stuff that was developed. I wonder if you would talk about Gail a little bit, and Gail's impact or contribution to not only like the VCBC's products, but also getting on the stand and representing us also well.
Okay, well, I guess to start, the cookies aren't necessarily the healthiest medicine for people, at least when it comes to the ingredients of the cookie. We often think of them as being made with love, and they can taste really good and such, but the sugar and flour at times isn't the best for people's digestive systems. And also it's a lot of extra food that's not, kind of necessary for the medical qualities that you're trying to get from the plant. And so it's been a lot easier to make a range of products with capsules rather than food products like cookies. Right now the club's got close to 20 different types of capsules with various strengths of THC, from a couple of milligrams to 130, and it would be very awkward to have all those ranges of strength in various types of cookies. As it is, we have 75 milligram cookies and different options for them, but not and in some ways the cookies were an initial selling point for patients that were dying of various ailments. In a way, the fact that it helps put weight on for cancer and AIDS patients seemed to be benefit. That wasn't a negative. Like I say, the sugar in the flour maybe, but now the club's developed not just a range of capsules, but we've got a range of topicals as well, because cannabis is a anti-inflammatory and not just painkiller and stuff, but it's anti-spasmodic, antioxidant, anti-carcinogenic, antiseptic, antifungal, when you apply it topically as well as orally. But topically, it's a magical ailment or ointment. And so, we've seen it used for a really wide range of conditions. So now we have stuff, actually Gail helped us really expand on our topical line with arnica and comfrey and St. John's wort oils for different things. And then made a green lion salve that has a bunch of essential oils. And now Clay has come in and tried different combinations of essential oils to make a cooling one called ice cream and a warming one called melting pot. So we've got a few options for people there. And we have some people that swear they would be suicidal without our topical products. And we have 6 types of suppositories as well. And that's in large part because of what I learned through my experience with Gail. Gail is a member of the club that I fell in love with pretty soon after meeting her. And we lived together for 10 years. And Gail was a herbalist and had a lot of health issues that led her to understand a lot about food and medicines and different healing practices. And so, Gail was really into making herbal teas as well. And unfortunately, despite all of her knowledge, her health was not well, and eventually she passed away from cancer. But at one point, when we thought she was going to die, we started to give her cannabis suppositories, and they calmed her down enough in the hospital that they sent her home, where I kept her alive for 2 more years, in large part because of a supply of cannabis suppositories. And so, we have 250 milligram suppositories that are designed specifically for cancer patients, and other ones that are lower dose or CBD as well. But Gail really helped us design a lot of topicals in particular, but she was also a huge force within our club with the digest, and she, as you mentioned, testified in the trial and did everything she could while she could to help this club and help others learn how to use this medicine.
A real legend, Gail. And the club continues to develop products. The newest product on the line is something that is very, very interesting, probably one of the most exciting products along the line of helping people with cancer. Rick Simpson was developing his oil when I was starting to get involved. I didn't know about it. I guess it would come out in 2012 or something, when he started coming out 2011. I didn't know about it when my sister had cancer, and she passed away of melanoma skin cancer, the same kind that he treated with his cannabis oil. And so this sort of stark, sticky honey oil is something that has become popular for people to use to help to treat their cancers. And the Victoria Cannabis Buyers Club has now got a new product for that. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Well, Rick really kind of made a name for himself making a rather crude kind of oil, but some people with experience have refined it a little bit, but it's not a lot different than what he made. And there has been some progress over the years. I've learned a lot through one of our members, Corey Yelland, who's not only cured herself of cancer by making Rick Simpson oil and suppositories, but helped countless others around the world pretty much every day on the phone and online, educating people about how to use this medicine and where to get it and stuff. And so, she's helped me understand some of the results from other countries and places that are a little bit further ahead than we are here in certain aspects, like Israel and even the UK in certain aspects. And so they've discovered that something I kind of knew all along, on one hand, that having more than one strain of cannabis is typically better medicine than single strains. A lot of it, I believe, is because I guess the simple term is terpenes, but really the volatile organic compounds, which include terpenes, have got far more medical qualities than we've anticipated. Everybody's really caught up on the THC, but that's by no means the only important component in this. And so each strain contains just a trace amount of these different terpenes, and you don't need much of them to get a medical benefit. It's almost is it allopathic medicine? Where you just need a touch of something. So I guess, so a lot of the science is that 8 strains or even more in one medicine is ultimately the best, because you get such a wide range of different compounds. And so we have a medicine that's made with more than 8. My friend doesn't even know at this stage how many different types he's kind of mixed all in together. And he's added some strains that are CBD dominant and has been able to come up with a 4-to-1 ratio, which apparently is best because the CBD, as well as fighting the cancer, slows the liver's ability to break down THC. And so the THC lasts longer in the body. And we have a 4-to-1 ratio of THC to CBD because we've learned that the CBD really helps with stopping or slowing the liver's ability to break it down, the THC down. And so it lasts longer in the body, and the THC has a better chance of hitting the cancer than getting broken down in the liver. So the 4-to-1 ratio is apparently ideal for that. And so, my friend has used plant material to do it. He hasn't even used isolate, which is pretty cool. I don't know if we'll be able to sustain that or sustain the prices. As I mentioned, we're selling it to $200 for the regular members, but we're actually able to give it at half price to cancer patients. And hopefully we're able to sustain that. We haven't really done a good job of broadcasting it, so it could be that if thousands of patients flood us for that medicine, we'll have trouble keeping up with the supply, at least at that price. But at least we can start with this and see how long it goes and how many we can help and go from there.
He's helping people get something that used to be about 10 times more expensive when I used to sell it on Salt Spring Island. And at that time, they were still very popular. People need this. It's very essential medicine. Doing this work, providing this essential medicine to people who don't have conventional options to go to, still, even though cannabis is now legal, still faces opposition, still needs to grow and expand. Still, there's a lot of people out there that could benefit from this. It always kind of got to me seeing the legal market go through these big gluts of, they have excess cannabis on stock, and I just wondered why they didn't ever turn it into an oil and then find some way to get that out to people. But I haven't seen anyone really pushing the envelope like you're doing, even though it's so essential, even though it's so important for people who are the most sick and the most unwell. So I want to talk a little bit about the challenges that you still face. I work here at the VCBC also, and we might be raided again. Well, we had talked a little bit about being arrested and charges, but there is still the threat of raids. There's still opposition to the VCBC operating. I can talk a little bit about the current state.
Well, when legalization was announced, we were all hopeful, but when the regulations were first coming out, it was clear that medical needs were not being adequately addressed. Even though medical marijuana has been allowed in Canada, most of the court cases have centered on fighting for the right to grow, and there hasn't been an argument for access in a storefront that's been fully argued. And so the limits placed on recreational stores as they came out, it was very clear that if we were to try and comply, and there's no guarantee that we could successfully do that financially, especially being a non-profit society. It's a lot different to raise funds than it is being a private company. And so, even economically, we might not have succeeded, but the first year we wouldn't have been able to sell edibles at all. Our supply would have been very limited. We would have had to separate the Buyers Club into two entities because we both do production and retail, and the new laws initially wouldn't allow an organization to own both ends of that. And so we would have lost all of our product line, or kept our product line but not had a storefront, or kept some of our product line even, because it's, we have dozens of products, and it would have been difficult to get many through in a short time back when it was initially going anyway. And so the 10 milligram limit that they placed, or Health Canada placed on edible products on after your decision, because that, before legalization happened, they decided that they would comply with the decision, but it was the Conservative government at the time, and they were completely hostile to the idea of medical marijuana, and they hoped that the 10 milligram limit would be one that would pass the constitutional arguments that would obviously be thrown against it, and appease the public to say that, there's edible products allowed, even though that dosage is so small as to be inadequate for most cancer patients or people that are trying to deal with chronic pain and not use opioids. And so, even if we, waited the year to sell edibles, the ones that we were going to be allowed to sell were so weak that for a lot of our members, they were essentially useless. And legalization also meant that because we couldn't get a medical storefront license, we would have to get a recreational one, and therefore not give any advice or talk about the medical qualities of our products in ways that really I just can't accept. So we knew when we weren't complying it was going to be rough and there was going to be a fight. And sure enough, they started to raid other facilities that weren't complying, 'cause we weren't the only one initially. There's a lot of people not complying for various reasons, either because they assumed they'd never transition, or in some cases like trees, they just didn't comply till the last minute and kind of got burned a bit for it, but ended up getting a license anyway. And so, we've been raided 3 times now since legalization. Been evicted, gotten a few eviction notices along the way too, but moved a few times to a new, really beautiful, ideal location. But it hasn't been easy. And we've been fined. Initially, I got my own fine of $3.2 million, which made the total $6.5 million almost. But that's been dropped, and so now we only face $3.2 million in fines so far, although we haven't gotten a fine from the last raid, and I estimate that fine alone could be from $7 to $10 million, depending on a few things. So yeah, we could be getting more, but it's been a couple years since the last raid. We filed an injunction and a lawsuit against the federal and provincial governments, and hasn't seen its day in court. Seems like neither us nor the province are in a rush to do that for reasons of our own. But that is pending, so in theory we could be raided or given another multi-million-dollar fine on any day that we come to work. But thankfully, in some ways, we don't face criminal charges here. It's administrative law that we're dealing with. So there isn't a jail time that we're being threatened with, but they are threatening to seize assets and assets of the board, for the most part, who don't own much in terms of assets. But my partner, Clea, does own a house that she bought long before she met me. So there is a certain risk with that. But again, it's not jail time, which is something that historically we did face. So, I'm very confident. We've got some great arguments. We've got the best lawyers in the country. In fact, not only did Kirk Tusaw come back into practicing law, but he's working with Jack Lloyd, a lawyer out of Ontario, and the two of them are an amazing team that has fended off the wolves for us very well so far.
It's excellent. So we're going to wrap it up. Next week, we're going to talk to Robert Laurie a little bit more, get into more of the law, and talk a little bit about the First Nations involvement, because we've seen more dispensaries now operating outside of the law on First Nations land. And I understand there's even there's a parallel with this place challenging the CSU. That's the people who raid the cannabis clubs. Any final comments on where this is going, or how you feel it's going?
Oh, I think the club has the most incredible future ahead of it. We have a lot of things happening that are really helping us develop and grow. This new space we moved into a year ago has been absolutely fantastic and inspiring to be in. And eventually I see us building integrated palliative care facilities that are providing medicines that are, certain strains of cannabis that are being grown to fight certain types of cancer, and making medicines out of them, and really, taking the care we provide to that next level. And so I really look forward to working with partners in many fields as we build these facilities on First Nations lands, and collaborate with other healers and and people in medicine to do something that if I end up having cancer at the end of my life, I would like to go into, because right now there's not a lot of great options for cannabis users to do that in. So it's been quite a struggle to survive, but we're at the point where we're ready to blossom, I think, soon.
I love that. And I'm here helping, and hopefully we can spread the word about this place and maybe even find more people who want to do things like this across the country. Maybe even across the world, if they hear about this pioneering effort and the way in which it is performed, the meaning behind it, some of the strategies for addressing the challenge that faces people all over the world. It's a really inspiring story to hear the story of Ted Smith, and there are so many stories within that story. As I said at the beginning, it's really a whole book of legends that we can flick through with Ted. And I have done this in the past in podcasts that we've done where we just go over dozens of, and Ted's own book, The History and Uses of Cannabis Sativa, dozens of topics of interest that you can find on the Cannabis Digest website, on the Cannabis Digest YouTube, as well as tons of articles there, all the work over decades that's been done. It's really a great archive to inspire. So thanks for listening. Thanks, Ted, for being here.
Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, thanks, Lee, for producing. And this is the Cannabis Guild, and this is the first episode. We're going to get more people in the guild as we move forward. Thanks for watching.